Hello, and welcome to Episode 6 of GP Red Presents. This episode is The Uphill Road to Financial Stability. This is actually part 1 of a 3-part series featuring a 5-person panel that was hosted and moderated by Amilia. Liz McConomy is the moderator. Chris Dropinski, Lisa Paradis, Jamie Sabbach, Stacie Anaya, and Janet Bartnik are the panelists that will be featured in all 3 of the parts. In part 1, they'll be discussing kind of the background and history of how we got to this place in time in cost recovery. Please like, subscribe, and comment. We would love that so we can bring you more episodes for GP Red Presents. I'm Dr. Teresa Penbrook, and I hope you enjoy this. Thanks.
So I wanted to start with a bit of a conversation around what are the current state of the world. So immediate, reality-based, we're in the middle of a pandemic. You know, social distancing rules have made it very difficult to use a lot of the facilities and services that are offered by Parks and Rec organizations. So I wanted to talk a bit about what the impact was in your minds across the board. So my first question is actually for Lisa. How would you summarize what agencies have been experiencing from the point of view where the pandemic began to where we are today?
Yeah, so I want to just dial it back to January, and let's think about pre-COVID-19 and where we all were. We had this veneer that the world was, or at least America was doing incredibly well. We were at one of the highest GMPs we've ever had. Joblessness was at a very, very low. The agencies that I came in contact, and I can probably say this for all the consultants that are on the board, on the panel today, were spending money hand over fist. Quite a bit of capital work being done, an eye to sometimes taking care of what they have had already, but with still this idea of building new. And when I say veneer is because there was truly a veneer for that, because one of the things that I also want to talk a little bit about is that even as of October of 2019, we had 9 states in the country that were operating in a structural deficit, meaning that their revenues were less than their bills. Basically, they were structurally in a structural deficit. So we were dealing with this stuff before in a different way. It has just now come to light. Once the coronavirus pandemic hit, what it did was just expose organizational's foundational weaknesses. The ones that already had cracks in them just became much, much larger. I liken this to the stages of grief, in that at first we were in this denial stage. This couldn't really be happening. It's going to be a 2-week kind of thing. Let's see what happens on the other side. I'll be back to your agency for community engagement. Couple of weeks, no problem. Then we were in this anger stage. How long could this possibly last? My gosh, you know, this thing has to be really over quickly. And then we were in the bargaining stage. Well, what if we can open this? Can we open that? Can we do this? And can we slide by? We got then, I think right after, if anyone was around this, felt this around the same time that I did, around Easter, right around Easter, we were all feeling this depression stage. This is really it. This is going on a lot longer than we thought it would. And then I think the reality started to set in. So the last part of that, those stages of grief, is acceptance. And for me, acceptance also means that you have to decide what you're going to do with that. And for that, that means that you can decide to respond and then manage the changes that need to happen. And that's the stage that organizations, agencies across the country are doing. And they're dealing with it very differently. Organizations that already had foundational cracks, like we said before, cracks that were in communication, leadership, financial stability modeling, are seeing more of that. I hear from a lot of clients and friends and colleagues across the country in a continuum model, from those who have daily updates from their municipal leadership to the ones who are radio silence. We've had an enormous number of furloughs and people laid off in organizations. And I think the prevailing thought out there, of course, is one of somewhat of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, of course. Most of that uncertainty is driven by the lack of communication, oftentimes by the leadership. So the good side to all this, though, too, is that the organizations that I've spoken to are trying to set this reset button. They realize, though, in this acceptance stage now, that it's an opportunity to really pare down what the wants versus the needs of their communities are, to bring forward the thought of emergence of parks and recreation as a viable and important piece and thread, the fabric of a community's lifestyle. They're looking toward their core philosophy and trying to understand a little bit better just what that is and how to align service delivery with that core philosophy. So I will just say, though, too, we are in a different stage now, and I liken it. In fact, I read an article in the New York Times over the weekend that said, that compared this to post 9/11. After 9/11, we were all at first shocked that we were going to have to take our shoes off and our belts off and do all that kind of crazy stuff going through security. Now it's a norm. And that is our new norm. So we are at that stage of acceptance and realizing a new norm. And part of that also has to do, of course, what we're talking about today is how we financially structure our systems so that we can allocate resources both equitably and to the community's most important needs.
Excellent. I love, I mean, there'd been an article out, but I love the comparison of the stages of grief. I thought when I first heard about that, it really resonated with me as well. And what I liked I liked everything you said, but what I thought was really interesting about what you said was we're at that stage of acceptance, which is hitting reset and looking to take action. So, which kind of leads me to a bit of my next question. So Chris, speaking of the actions that people are looking to build right now or looking to take, what do you anticipate are going to be some of the most obvious challenges that the majority will face in the short term? I wanted to know, Chris, what do you think the next 3 months are going to look like in terms of the big challenges that we're looking to try and tackle right now?
You know, I think my work at GreenPlay and with GP Red, our educational research partner, leads me to believe that one of the first challenges we're going to have is just being in the right frame of mind for this. You got to take care of yourself so you can help lead and help others. The world around us is different. Your office space and work tools are different. You've got to make time for your own physical and emotional recreation. We've got to accept that the ever-changing information and waiting for direction is our reality. However, don't wait for them to come up with answers in areas that you can influence. You have to be part of them because decisions will be made for you if you're not there to influence them. And you might not like what those decisions are. And avoid thinking that the quicker we can get through this and back to what was, the better, because it's not going to be the same. You thought things have been tight in the past. Well, another layer of the onion just got peeled back in a very big way. The second challenge I see is believing in and being able to tell the story of who we are and what is our purpose. We are not the services we provide. These programs and services are just the way we fulfill our mission and purpose. We're not fitness activities. We're the spaces and places for physical activity. We're not senior centers. We weave the social fabric, but we bring people together and stimulate their minds. We're not special events. We create connections and promote joy. So we know and understand the people in our communities better than most, and we can change what we provide and how we provide it in order to fulfill our purpose. So what's needed now kind of is the definition of essential. It's not about getting back to where we were. It's providing value now by responding to big community issues, the pulse of the community, and making ourselves as valuable as we can as part of that solution. You know, GP Red has done a lot of disaster resiliency work, showing that the more stressed the community is, the greater the need for places and programs that promote health and physical activity and stress management and access to nature. Isolation, we know, can severely impact immune system response and healing time, and social engagement is proven support for mental health. So having those places available, especially outdoors right now, is crucial to reduce anxiety and promote healing and a return to normalcy, or at least a new normal. So what is improving quality of life by assuring the access, but we're also providing meals, we're providing childcare for essential service workers and summer camps so that people can go back to work. And we're sheltering the homeless and providing spaces for emergency response. And as we can, we're phasing in other opportunities with new rules. So doing what needs to be done now in the face of what we have to deal with. The third challenge I see is how we get it done really matters. And here's what we have to deal with. You know, you thought you were playing basketball and now you're playing football. The rules have changed. You've just mastered the piano and now you've been handed a guitar and asked to play a complex tune. NRPA and the state associations and local regions, they've all done a great job in banding together right now to speak with one voice and to convene the sharing of ideas and resources. So you need to take advantage of that. But be aware, what works elsewhere might not be the best thing for you or the right timing right now, because we have communities on the upside, the flat, and the downside of the curve. We are rural and urban, we are sales tax funded and property tax funded. Outdoor and indoor focus. So there's lots of differences in what's going on. So take and use what you can. Lack of information is a lack of power. So we need to capture and use our own data to make decisions or help others make decisions. Major cuts without good guidelines and criteria in place by which to make them is a huge challenge. And broad brush or equal cuts across the board is probably not going to be in the best interest of your community. So, you know, you want to be kind to your foundations, the 501c3 groups out there. History shows that nonprofit trends coming out of bad economies are very good. You know, there'll be a dip, but they come back. And there's still people out there with money to give and a strong sense of wanting to help, maybe just not right now. So build those relationships in the meantime. Be talking to those people. Tell them that you care and what they do is important, even if you can't do something right now. I serve on the National Association of Park Foundations, and they've got a tremendous offering of webinars and roundtables in motion for members right now. Take advantage of the volunteer spirit. Think boldly. How can you harness this energy? GP Red launched its YouTube channel, GP Red Presents, and episode 2 features El Cajon, California Parks and Recreation Director Frank Carson talking about creative programming now, engagement strategies they're using to reach out to their communities, including such things as the Hopscotch Challenge with the El Cajon Rec Squad, which they were able to quickly turn into a sponsored outreach. Their council support to offer free virtual classes for this summer, he talked about, and reporting that 60% of the participation in their efforts is from folks they've never served before. So you should check out that video. But, you know, we have this freedom and support right now that we've not really had in the past to use our resources for marketing our services, which is a big step in our rebuilding. So in terms of financial stability, the biggest challenge and opportunity right now is building a strong foundation for the future. Every organization in your community is in the same boat, and they're all looking for how they can fulfill their mission in different ways. So reach out in new ways, strengthen your relationships with the schools, the health department, the nonprofits, and combine what resources you have, make a difference, and be visible. This is going to build the foundation for the future funding from taxes, fees, and other contributions, and how you put that back together again.
It was really insightful, and some of the things I really loved was the idea of, you know, it's easy to get bogged down in the what do I need to do to figure out how to move all the pieces and not look up and think how am I needed? How am I needed right now as an organization? And thinking about how you are by default essential. It's not about what is only essential to your organization, but how your organizations and agencies are critical to the health, mental and physical of your communities, and how you can support them in those meaningful ways. It's so easy to get just weighed down by the logistics that you need to manage, but the impact that you're making is so great. So thank you for that, Chris. And Jamie, it just leads me into a question that I really wanted to ask you, which is, knowing that in the short term, there's a lot of quick adjustments that need to be made. When it comes to the midterm or long term, I'm thinking September into kind of Q4 into 2021, what do you think the big challenges are going to be for organizations that are just coming out of the crisis mode head mindset, and what challenges are they going to be faced with?
My perspective is, and it's primarily built on the fact that I've been spending the last 6 to 8 weeks really focused on this more post-recovery and reopening strategy work. And I think one of the biggest challenges in front of everyone in our field, in this park and recreation industry space, particularly in the public sector, is going to be thinking and acting beyond the more immediate recovery and reopening strategy discussion. And when I say immediate, it broaches, the next couple of months, the next 3 to 6 months, even into the end of 2020. And we've got to recognize this is not going to be an easy exercise, certainly, but it's going to be absolutely necessary. So I think for the purposes of our panel discussion today, I'd put the 3, what I consider to be kind of umbrella challenges for the next 6 to 12 months into 3 buckets. And the first would be the money as foundational. Then optimization of our systems and organizations, and then finally accepting and working within this new reality. I find myself staying away from the word normal in any way, shape, or form. Arguably, I'm not sure that normal was good for most in our country the way it was. It may have been comfortable for quite a few, but I'm not sure it was best for our society. But if we start with, the challenge around just the basics, the fundamental, the foundation of money, I see it as organizations being required to quantify the financial implications of the pandemic. And this isn't going to be just in our current budget exercise or even thinking about 2021's budget, but forecasting for the next few years and creating these operating scenarios for 2021, 2022, and potentially even 23 and 24. And really tying the knots with the operating and capital budgets all in one. It's about all the money we're going to anticipate bringing in and more importantly, expending, recognizing that pre-pandemic, our expenses were outpacing our revenues before. So I think it's really coming to terms with that. And I think it's going to be critical that organizations come to terms as well with the financial implications and grasping and understanding their cost of doing business at a micro level, not just looking at, the bottom line, if you will, but really understanding the costs associated with delivering all of our services. And this does connect the dots to need and essential, and that's a bigger conversation, but I think we've got to be very cautious that we don't presume and assume that Parks and Recreation as a whole is essential any longer. Maybe some of the things that we do are essential, but we need to understand that there are elements of our system that are essential and that affect community need, but not everything we were doing does. And it's understanding that very basic premise so that we can really be thoughtful about how we're going to invest taxpayer dollars. What this all really means in terms of the money is doing the math. Bottom line is, and I say this often, if you can't write the checks, nothing else matters. So every decision we make begins and ends with the dollars and cents. The second bucket for me in terms of challenge is optimization. Again, this notion of how do we optimize our systems and our organizations. We've got more than 30 million people unemployed in the US, and frankly, that number likely dwarfs the reality. Many people didn't get their claims processed. Many people don't have access. And we also need to understand that the service industry, of which Parks and Recreation is a huge, significant part of, have been hardest hit by the pandemic. So our economic landscape in many communities has changed dramatically, and it's likely going to be changed for the foreseeable future, if not into perpetuity. So I'm anticipating many are going to focus on how to bring back furloughed employees, but with large portions of budgets being dedicated to personnel in public parks and recreation, and I think the average is 60 to 70%, which is incredibly profound in terms of statement. This is going to be a very hard thing to do, is to keep all of our employees or bring back all of our furloughed employees in some instances. I think the more innovative organizations are going to dedicate their energies to how to repurpose their staffs to serve broader communities in broader ways. And this is already being done in some circumstances. But I believe that we're going to see the creation of the reinvention of things like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which interestingly enough and ironically came as a result of the Great Depression. And similar efforts to employ people in our communities to serve the park and recreation needs that so many communities are thirsty for. And knowing the tremendous costs of unemployment, which include financial, emotional, and social costs, I think organizations understand that they're going to have to be more efficient and not subsidize waste. And they're going to be charged with reinvesting staff resources differently, possibly repurposing them entirely. And that leads to paring down our service menus. We're going to have a laser focus on collaborative efforts, real community need, and being more thoughtful and intelligent about not providing everything to everyone all the time, which has been our mantra, unfortunately. And then finally, the third bucket is accepting and working within this new reality. In quite a few presentations, I will frequently ask the question, if you had the chance to rebuild or build your system from scratch, would you design and construct it in such a way that it would look like it does today? And I cannot recall, honestly, anyone ever responding yes to that question, which is very profound in and of itself. So I think this pandemic, while incredibly painful and heartbreaking, just may have presented us with an opportunity for a do-over. Hopefully the majority will see this crisis through the lens of opportunity and as an optimistic challenge. This is going to require us not to succumb to short-term memory loss like many did 12 years ago after the Great Recession, where we've got plans to go back to the way things were before the pandemic. Preparation and planning for difficult work and conversations is going to require that we do homework and that agencies use data and information to tell their stories to illustrate this new reality. There's going to be a lot of tough work ahead, and we're going to have some really interesting failures along the way. And we're also going to have politicians and policymakers getting in our way. So it's going to be really important that we put our best foot forward and become teachers in many ways so that citizens and staff and policymakers understand how things will have to change and why things will have to be different. And I guess I'd wrap it up simply with just saying that we're going to need to speak loudly for those who do not have a voice, as these people who don't have a voice and haven't had a voice had the greatest needs in our communities prior to the pandemic, meaning they're going to be having even greater needs moving forward.
This episode of GP Red Presents is part of a GP Red special initiative called Operation Recreation Response, with a focus on helping agencies prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. If you are interested in becoming involved with ORR, please email info@gpred.org.